Waubonsee. As an immigrant to this country, I have often spoken about our experiences with my good friend Lulu, and we share many of the same sort of backgrounds. But part of the challenge, I think, of being able to look at education as a possibility is that we often come from backgrounds and environments where our families didn't necessarily see education as a means of transcendence, as a means of being able to escape from poverty. And we often have talked about and have theorized as to why that is. I think that our families are very noble and very giving, but oftentimes the limitation of our own mindset, the limitation of our own background of oppression and poverty sometimes limits the vision of what is possible. It's an honor for me to be here with you, not just as a graduate, but as somebody who really has benefited greatly from the work and the care of so many volunteers in my own life. People that have willingly stepped up to give and support from their heart. I have one such friend here in the audience with my friend Harini, who has helped me edit the book. When I had finished the book that I just wrote and had it sitting around for a while, actually a few years, and I told her about it. She was very anxious to get it off my hands, and in the process of that, actually, the book became published. So the idea of volunteering is generative, and it is a giving that really comes from the heart. I think that oftentimes we are all burdened by our own limitations and our own capacity of limited vision, but those people that volunteer and that truly give from the heart are able to take part of what is possible and expand it to the next level. And so I just want to say, on behalf of all the people that are not here, and on behalf of all the people that you have touched, that you may not even be aware of how many lives you have touched, thank you. I see people here that have helped immigrants, with the Dominican Learning Center. I see people that have really helped individuals who are not able to have a voice. And on behalf of all of these individuals without a voice, I really, from the bottom of my heart, want to say thank you. Let me tell you a little bit about my book, because as an author, of course, I have to plug my own book. But as a psychologist and as an immigrant, I have really struggled to look at everything that I've learned and be a critical consumer of what I've learned and think about how what I learned really applies to my own life, how it applies to my cultural background, how it applies to my sense of reality. And oftentimes there's been sort of a gap between what I was learning in books and where my culture and my family was coming from. And I've often felt sort of as an observer, standing outside of reality, looking in. And so this book is a way for me to integrate all of the teachings that I have been a recipient of. I value my traditional education, but I also know that the power of our ancestors, the power of our elders to be able to influence our lives and to be able to carry on a nobility of teaching is also very much part of who I am and where I come from. And I think that in these times of turbulence and these times of change and uncertainty, that the lesson of our ancestors, all of our ancestors, that has a nobility and a gift that we shouldn't so easily discard. And I think that one of those teachings, which is probably the most relevant to your work and to your giving as volunteers, is the concept of community versus individuality. Now, many of us have come and have been entrenched in a culture that tells us that we ought to be rugged individuals, that we should be all that we can be, that we should achieve to the fullest potential, and that all those others that are around us represent competition to be eliminated. It represents those individuals that are going to take the opportunity away from us. And so, oftentimes in this identity of rugged individualism, we strive and we work to be the very best, but often at the expense of really recognizing that we are part of a larger structure. We are part of a larger community. Volunteers recognize the gift of that community. Volunteers recognize that the truth of who we are as human beings is really much broader and much richer than simply the individual gifts that we are able to bring to the table. In traditions of color, in the African American and Latino community, the idea of an individual is really much more relevant and much more valuable when we begin to see the individual in the context of community. We begin to see the individual in the context of family and what they can offer to somebody else. And I think that all of us in our background, all of us somewhere in our collective consciousness, have that awareness of ourselves as part of a large family, which is why we are so eager to give back, which is why we are so eager to help somebody else. This idea of community, this idea of helping, the idea of recognizing that we are part of a larger structure, feeds us, and it gives us a greater sense of ourselves as well. The topic of my talk is why it pays to volunteer. So, if we are volunteering, why do we do it? And I often feel, and talking to Bruno here at our table, one of the things that you often hear from volunteers is that they get so much back, that their life is so much enriched, and that their life is so much greater because of what they've been able to do to give to somebody else. And this concept of feeling great about the work that you do is based in a scientific principle. There is a process of generativity. Adler and Maslow and a couple of other psychologists have talked about the idea of development of a human being. So if we all develop as individuals, and we all focus on being for ourselves and only for ourselves, then what happens at some point is that the self collapses in on itself. The idea of you as an individual is a facade. We all sort of spend this whole time and energy on building something that is false. And this falseness is the ego, our identity, the persona, the image of ourselves that we give to the public, the image of ourselves that we like to sell to others. But beyond this image of the self is the reality, which is that we are all part of one family. We are all part of one humanity, one life that is lived and that is incarnated through each one of us. And the concept of giving back, the concept of volunteering, comes from a deep understanding and a deep connection to that reality. Not just your life, that your life lived alone and individually is a worthless reality. That unless you are able to touch others, and unless you are able to give back, unless you are able to contribute and to love deeply, then your life has limited potential and it has limited capability. This is an important lesson in today because so much of our society seems to be stuck on me, me, me. And while we have access to the internet and we have access to information and we have become such a sophisticated society, we're also, as a human race, seeing the deepest levels of depression and anxiety that we ever have before. We are feeling anxious and we are feeling lost and afraid. And at the bottom of all this is the sense that sense of fear and isolation comes from our own identity formation. It comes from our own ability and our own thought that what we need to do is to continue to do more and to do more and to do more for ourselves, for me alone. The individual that is hurt, the individual that is traumatized, the individual that has been disillusioned by life is not going to be able to give back. Because of the pain and hurt that these individuals feel, they often feel that the world owes them something, somebody ought to give them something, and somebody ought to look at the pain and the suffering that they are enduring. Volunteers recognize that in order to liberate these individuals that are stuck in their trauma and their pain, we have to teach a different reality. The reality of compassion, the reality of life, the reality of giving, that liberates not only the one that is oppressed and lost in their limited concept of love and reality, but it also liberates and expands our own concept of what life and love is. That is why we volunteer. There is this concept then that if we don't give back, we stagnate, we stop growing. The concept of generativity, the growth that human beings develop and the growth that human beings take on at a certain stage is this stage of generativity. What you don't give, you don't receive. What you are not able to surrender, you are then limiting yourself by that. So the concept of giving, the concept of volunteering, is a concept of self-growth for us. This is how we generate, this is how we leave a legacy of who we are and what we are to the next generation, to the next expression of life. There is also this concept of empathy, that the idea of feeling for somebody else, not feeling sorry. We help not because we pity somebody and because we feel that they need our help in order to be more human, but we help because we feel true empathy. And the concept of true empathy is that we feel with the same heart, and we express that love with the same heart. And so empathy is to feel with somebody else, not to feel pity for and not to try to rescue, but to realize that the condition of being a human being, the condition of giving, is one that is very relevant to all of us. It is there before the grace of God go I. It is there that condition to which I am helping, I am also trying to change within myself. There is a concept in Aztec mythology, there's a concept in ancient culture that talks about is a mirror. This concept is called enlakesh, meaning that you are my other self. That when I look into your face, I see a reflection of who I am. For those of us that are able to give, for those of you that are able to volunteer, and to give of the most precious resource that you have, which is your time and your energy, the ability of reflecting that back to somebody then comes back to you. And that is called the economy of giving. It is said that what you give is multiplied and returned to you multiple times over. What you give comes back to you multiple times. And time again, let me tell you that I've met a lot of people who are stuck in their lives and who don't know where they're going. And the one thing that I always recommend to them is volunteer. Volunteer. Because when you volunteer, you get out of your own limited reality. We often feel, when we are caught up in our own little world, in our own importance, self-importance, we often feel that the world is on our shoulders and that everything is against us. And the more we try to fight that reality, the more we seem to get ourselves stuck in it. The solution is not to try to do more. The solution is try to do more for somebody else. The solution is to give back, volunteer, give to somebody. By focusing on other individuals, by focusing on the needs of the other, you are able to grow in multiple ways that perhaps you never imagined. This is the truth of who we are. That we are all one family, regardless of race, regardless of background, regardless of identity. That the concept of one community giving back is the concept of our next evolution process. We as human beings have evolved physically, technologically, in every possible way that we can imagine. So the next quantum leap of evolution, the evolution that our ancestors talked about, this promise of the fifth sun, this year of 2012 that everybody seems to dread, is not so much the end of the world as people often fear. It is the end of the world as we have known it and the embracement of something much richer than what we have imagined. The idea that finally we can break the barriers of racism, we can break the barriers of sexism, of idolatry and of hatred, and recognize that beyond all of that
is the common fiber and the common element that weaves all of us into one loving and helping community. That we are all, in reality, one family. And so, I have nothing left to say except thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for the compassion that you show others. Thank you for giving of the most precious resource that you have, which is your time, which is your energy. Know that there are people that you are touching on a daily basis that may not be able to be here present, but that their energy, their spirit, their self-presence is here with us to be able to join in this celebration of gratitude on your behalf. To say, thank you for being a part of my life and for making my life richer. Thank you for helping.
Thank you, Dr. Fajita. That was wonderful. A great message for all of us.